This is the Smallmouth Crush podcast. If you're a hardcore angler, you've come to the right place. This is a weekly podcast that will interview some of the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America. Travis and his guest will discuss what it takes to consistently catch big smallmouth, and you'll get a glimpse inside the mind of a trophy smallmouth angler. And now, here's your host of the Smallmouth Crush podcast, Travis Manson.
Yo, welcome to the Smallmouth Crush podcast. Here it is, another week talking smallmouth fishing. Have you guys had enough of this? I hope not. It's been going really good. We got a lot of great smallmouth anglers that we've been talking to every week. We're getting towards the end. That's the bad news. Got to figure out what we're going to do for season 2. I mean, how do you top this one? Well, we're going to try. Today's guest, is definitely one of the top smallmouth anglers in the country. And there's a theme. A lot of the studs are up there, Michigan, Wisconsin, New York, Ontario, Canada. I don't know, all those places up north where the big smallies live. And so I'm super excited to bring our next guest on. Chad Pipkens will be joining us shortly. But before we go there, let's talk about The Real Shot, of course. The Real Shot's been a sponsor of the Smallmouth Crush podcast all season long. And you guys know the drill by now. They got a lot of great tackle. If you're looking for anything for your next trip or perhaps your upcoming tournament, you can head on over to therealshot.com and use my code SmallmouthCrush15, and you're going to get 15% off your first order, which is a pretty cool deal. And we certainly appreciate their support. So let's bring Chad on. And just like that, there he is, man. Awesome. I know you've been super, super busy. Finally was able to get you on here. And now we get to talk a little bit about your experience when it comes to smallmouth fishing. And I know you love catching smallmouth. But before we get into all that, because I have a ton of questions I want to ask you, if you could give us a quick little, just a brief background on yourself, where you're from now, and kind of what your plans are for the future.
Yeah, for sure. I'm up in Michigan. I grew up in the Lansing area. We're still around there now, and grew up fishing team tournaments around here. And then back when I was started, which is oddly, I've been on tour for 9 years full time now, which is insane. So it was a while ago. They didn't have high school fishing, didn't have college fishing. I grew up fishing against all the old dudes in the club tournaments. I mean, that's how we cut our teeth. You know, there wasn't this sweet networking system like the young guys have now, which is just amazing. I mean, I had to fish like Wednesday nighters and Tuesday nighters and all the weekend stuff. And then, you know, fish some BFL deals and did pretty well in that. And then once I finished college, I was fortunate and met a buddy through a mutual friend, Chad Skank and Wesley Strader. And I traveled as a co-angler for like, I think 4 years full time. And man, there's no better way to learn than learning from other people. So I did that while I was doing that, like at the national level, the FLW tour. I was also fishing out of my boat, doing bass opens, and I think Costas or Everstarts or Strands, whatever they call them. But that's what we were doing then too. That way you're learning in your boat, you know, making decisions, but then you're also in other guys' boats watching their decision making and kind of picking up on different things you might not be familiar with. So that's kind of how I got started fishing. And then, man, when it happens, it just happens. The 1 year I was like, man, I got to work a little more so I can pay for some entry fees. I was ready to fish the FLW tour at the time and just ready to cross over. And I think I fished 2 that year with the guy I was traveling with and was fortunate. Won the last one, like 30 grand, I think it was. And I was fishing the opens that year, won the points also. So I got my invite to the Elite Series. And I happened to have another tour event for FLW, like an open out in Detroit, and won like 28 grand over there for, finishing third. It was one of those, I mean, I won more that year than I won my whole career, really. And that's how I set up my first year, you know, so everything clicked at once. And that's, if you talk to guys, that's kind of how it goes, man. You just, when it's your time, you get that window and it just rolls in. And now I've been, you know, fishing on the Elite Series for 9 years full time and still searching for a W. I've led day 1, day 2, day 3, just never day 4. So if we can lead on day 3 at the Classic, that's fine. That's, you know, that's acceptable because
sure.
Only 3 days, so, but it's been good, man. Just making a living at fishing, it's possible. It takes time, man. I'm proof of that because to start, man, you hustle and grind. And I did substitute talk, construction, landscape, paint, you know, retirement planning, life insurance. Like I've done everything and ref and I still do a lot of it. But now, like I can finally say, after 10 years, fishing can pay the bills. I just keep the other stuff in play just because, I want to do what I want to do later in life. But I mean, it takes time to, acquire the business relationships and stuff, and to kind of hone your skills fishing, man. It's hard when you come out. I mean, not everybody comes out like, Wheeler and Jordan. Those guys just come out swinging, and it's one out of millions, And the rest of us, you start clicking. That's why a lot of guys you see when they start winning AOI and doing well, I mean, they're in their 40s. You get your finance piece set up, you get comfortable with your style, and everything starts to click. And I'm getting closer, man. I haven't transferred that over from the Opens yet. I've won AOI there twice for the Northerns, and I haven't strung 9 events together yet for the tour. But we're getting close. It's either the middle that is good, the end, or the beginning. But I seem to mess up somewhere for like 1 to 3 events, and it bites me in the butt every year. But we're getting closer.
So traveling so much and such a big schedule, do you get time to just go out and have a little bit of fun on the water anymore?
No,
zero.
No, that dude, I get messages, man, you should take me fishing. I'm like, everybody that's listening, I would love to take all of you fishing, but I don't get to take anybody fishing. Like, my wife loves to fish. She's fished 0 times this year. How many times have I been on St. Clair, Lake Erie? 0 this year, which is brutal because I love it out there. But it's just, we have been home. I was home 1 weekend this past weekend. That's
crazy.
And that's since February. Now, part of that is, the scheduling this year, I think, was, we were done in July because of COVID. I think they front loaded some stuff to make sure we could get it in, because last year was equally tough because we fished through mid-November. So every year has its own challenges. And this was a great year. Had another good year, finished strong, but it's just one of those, like, you don't have a ton of free time. And me, like, I'm at home. I still run a little painting company. I still have some rental places. So it's like, I got something popping up here. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you've got to hustle, and it takes time. And unfortunately, it takes away from the free time too. I mean, I love to get out and fun fish as much as you do, but I'm not out there like fun fishing by myself. Like, my joy is getting out there with people that don't get to do what we do a lot, and watching them catch a big smallmouth tail walk out of the water. I mean, that's what it's all about,
Right. So what would you say your home body of water would be?
Definitely Lake Erie, Lake St. Clair. I mean,
okay.
I won Lake St. Clair as an open, but I did not win Lake St. Clair. I drove 70 some miles to Lake Erie, and that's where I grew up, like, cutting my teeth. And my style of fishing is that because of that. Like, I like to run and gun. I like to fish real specific stuff. I like to know exactly what I'm fishing so I can fish it quick. I'm not – the one tournament I did lead this year, I was fishing just a weed line out on Pickwick, and just – I didn't have a lot else, so I just, like, beat the dead horse and kept it. But that is not me. Like, I like to fish them for 5 to 10 minutes, move to the next deal. And especially with smallmouth, because, like, if they don't want to bite, they're not going to bite. I mean, people think they're always so aggressive. They are when they are, you know what I mean? But it's not like that all the times. And I've been on schools of them where they're just down there, they're just swimming. If you put a camera down, when you see marks, it'll make you want to quit fishing, because if they're not biting, they're all freaking bass. They just choose when they want to bite. And I feel like the more I can rotate and run those rotations, like, I'm going to hit them when they're going to bite at some point. I might pick up one here or there, but eventually it's going to go down.
Walk us through a typical, whether it be a tournament or just practice or a day of fun fishing on Lake Erie. What are you specifically, I guess, what is your go-to technique? Like, what's your favorite way to catch them? And are you going to try to develop a pattern off of those strengths, or how do you kind of dictate which direction you're going to go when you're targeting smallmouth?
Yeah, now Lake Erie, I've spent so much time out there. And before, like, when I started, we didn't have forward sonar, we didn't have 360, we didn't even have side imaging. So, like, it's insane to see most of the places I fish are still places that I fished, 15 plus years ago, except before, me and my buddy Ryan said we would get in a boat and we would literally drive up, and, like, any place that looked like a teeny bit of contour. Like, there's not much contour out there, but any place that showed like just a teeny irregulation, we would get in the boat and go 20 miles an hour and just zigzag. And we would mark any little notch, anything that jumped up at all, like, we'd mark it. And then we'd go back, and then we'd slow down and idle and do the same thing. And we marked every teeny little high spot. And I mean, now you can I can idle through those areas that took me literally years to figure out. And every little place I got a dot, a little pile of gravel, a little bit of rubble. And before, like, I'd have 2 or 3 really good pieces, and I'm catching them here, and my co-angler starts just wailing on me out the back, and I don't even know what's back there. So next time I go out, I'm like, oh man, there's another mark here, you know, or it's super windy. I remember fishing like 6-footers out of the east, and I had to set up like long drifts, which I'm not a big drifter, but I started to realize like there was more pieces, you know, ahead. And so over the time, it's like now you're just using the technology, man. It's those places, they're a lot easier to find, but they take time, because some of the sweet spots are not the really jagged stuff. They're really subtle, like just smallmouth, like clean bottom. So it's little bits of gravel, and it's just, you know, seeing some irregularities. Sometimes one in particular, like I didn't even know what it was. I just saw the graph, like it just barely moved, you know, instead of being a perfect sand straight line, it just kind of wiggled. And all it was it went from sand to like literally gravel. So there wasn't even much, maybe a 6-inch rise, you know, over a certain amount of feet, but it didn't change a lot. And like finding those areas and then getting bit in those areas, like that's the juice out there. And that's what's so frustrating to me, because I've spent literally 15 to 20 years finding those places. Right. I haven't got to fish out there since, you know, they don't let us run there a lot anymore, which is a bummer, because that's way more my style, you know. So if we go out for an elite event and have a tournament, I've got enough stuff, like, I mean, thousands of dots, and I can't check them all. But I've got certain ones that I know are the juice, and some of them are in 8 to 10 foot, some of them are in 15 to 20, some are, you know, 25 to 30. So once I get out in some of those places, sometimes it's a depth that's the deal. A lot of times, what I've started to realize is, you know, there's resident fish that live in places, but I'm a big believer that those mega schools, like the ones you're like, when you're looking for that fish that's like, but a bluegill tall, nice stripes, not a mark on them, it's not beat up, no hook marks, no scars, nothing. Like those are those nomadic fish. And when they show up, that's when it's lights out. Like I truly believe that. I mean, I've seen guys do that out by the helipad in Pelee Island. You know, their 2-day total, they got 50 pounds, you know, and then there's 3 guys out there all in the top 3, and they go out on day 3. Dude, nobody catches one. They literally left. The whole school left. And they were like, they had 25 a day. Their co-anglers had 20 plus. And I've been on the opposite side of that, where you're catching small fish and you can tell they're resident. And a couple days later, it's like, dude, I don't know where they came from. The wind changed. I think they followed the bait in, and sometimes they're there for a year. Sometimes it's, you know, a month or whatever. But a lot of times it's not just like only this depth. It's this section. Like they're in this 1 mile stretch. And I think they're roaming around, and they roll up, and they're here, and they're from 4 feet to 35 feet on every sweet spot. And you're trying to get those clues. Like, is it going to be lights out, or is it going to be, you know, I got to just hit these 10 to 12 places, and I'm going to get a bite here or there. And that's how it used to be. I mean, you used to go out there and grind and try to get eight bites. And if you did, you're going to catch 20 plus. And it changes every year with, you know, where they're at and what they're doing. But
so when you find a big school of fish, or you feel like you're on to something, are you really optimistic going into an event, or do you keep that in the back of your mind that these things could be gone?
Dude, they're gone so much. And that's one thing I realized too. And that's what I like about them, because that's how I fish. The one thing I do note, and the biggest key to smallmouth fishing, is you don't have to get bit everywhere. You just need to get in the right area and then know what to fish. You know what I'm saying? It's like the biggest mistake is only fishing the school where you got bit, or only fishing, you know, the places you've got bit. Like, get in your area, and you got stuff that's similar that you didn't get bit on, mix that in your rotation too. And it's hard for people to do that sometimes, just because you're like, why am I going to fish a tournament, you know, and fish where I didn't get bit? But that's how you win tournaments. You make the changes, you know, and that's how you figure out what's going on that day, not what was yesterday. Because one day in particular, in a tournament, in a practice, I caught one that had this weird mark on her face. I waited. It was like 597 on my column right. And 3 days later, I caught that same fish out quarter mile down the road on a different rock pile. I mean, exact same weight, same mark on her face. They just slide. I think they, you know, rotate with bait, move in and out of stuff. And I've been on them where it's going to go down, and then they are literally gone if something happens. You know, they're still around somewhere, but it's like sometimes they go for a swim, and hopefully they swim towards you, not away from you.
Sure. What would you say your favorite way to catch them? Your favorite technique, if you had one?
Yeah, I mean, drop shotting is a great way to catch them. It's a terribly not a fun way to fish unless you're just catching them. It's not an actually fun process unless you're catching fish, which is, you know, tournament fishing. It's one of the best ways to catch them, because you're going to catch 19 out of 20 fish at least. But my favorite way to catch them is cranking, like out there. I love catching them on top water, but because of gobies and stuff, I feel like you're wasting your time if you're throwing top water out there. You know, I've seen it where it's calm and maybe it'd work, but when they get on that crankbait bite, there's nothing like it because they eat it so well, and they jump and they run, and you can just cover water so quick. So when they get in that, 7 to 12, 13 foot depth, and I can pick up the DC 300 from Demiki. That's the one I won out there with. I mean, I think the one day I caught.
So you've been using that crankbait for years.
Dude,
you've been talking about that for years.
And they eat it, and they eat it everywhere. Like I let at fork with it. I've caught them at a bunch of other places. I caught them in New York, some big largemouth up at Cayuga. I caught them in the AOI Championship at Sturgeon Bay. I catch them out at Champlain every year. And when I won on Erie, that's why I weighed every single bass I caught on. And dude, it was the nice thing about it is it's a little smaller profile, but you can throw it a mile. It's weighted well. You can throw it into the wind. But it's like when they get it, they usually get it. I mean, it's not a bait that they throw a lot. Like if you're cranking, some guys are like, dude, I catch like 1 out of 3. If I'm cranking with that, like in Champlain and specifically, I think on day 1 and day 3, I caught them cranking this year, like most of the fish I weighed. And I jumped off 2 on the initial, like where they eat it and you don't get a hook in them and they jump off, like that's your fault. They move fast. You never hooked them. But out of the fish I hooked, I caught every single bass that I hooked. And I think I caught like 20 or 30, which is pretty sweet cranking. When you're cranking and you're hooking, 25, 30 fish and you're catching every one after the first jump, like that's solid. That means that you got the right bait, probably got the right rod set up,
So I got to drill you a little bit. I got to dig a little deeper into this. Okay. Guys are going to want to know, the exact, like if you could pick one, I guess model number or series, what is it? The 300 you said?
Yeah. 300. The 200 is a good bait as well, but like, it goes maybe a foot less, I feel like. But the 300, what I really like about it is most crankbaits, when they come out of the pack, you got to tune them a little bit to get them to run true. And the DC 300 is no different. But once you play around with it and tune it right, you can't get that thing to roll up. You can burn that little crankbait. It's only this big. And you can burn it as fast as you can, and it will run straight, true, and dig. And that's what fires those smallmouth up. Like,
do you find yourself burning it more often than not?
I burn the fire out of it. Yeah, and it's not just a straight burn, but it's that erratic. It's like those smallmouth. I used to get bit a lot, like when I'm out there and then I'm winding, and then I go to reel it into the boat. And they get it at the boat. I'm like, it's not like they don't all live under the boat. You know what I mean? Like they were tracking the bait, and then when the crankbait lifts is when they react to it and bite it. So just doing it, like keeping your brain working, you notice that you start seeing that you can trigger a lot of those strikes mid cast by making changes, picking up the speed, changing the cadence, lifting the bait. And you're going to get a lot more bites doing that for sure.
Okay. So adjusting kind of how you're reeling, but reeling in quickly. If you could pick the best gear ratio for a reel for that specific technique, what would it be?
Yeah, all I throw is 8 to 1. I mean,
fast.
Gotcha. Like, and you, when they want to chase it, you can't get it from them. I remember specifically at Oneida a few years ago, they come up kind of biting or schooling over here, and I was trying to get my bait in to make another cast, and I was literally cranking it as fast as I could, possibly reel it. And it's like, and I catch it like a 3 1/4, and it just crushed it.
Wow. Okay, so let's step back a little bit and talk about the actual setup. So we know it's an 8 to 1. As far as your rod, are you a fiberglass? Are you a composite guy? What do you prefer when it comes to cranking for smallmouth?
Definitely. Yeah. I've had a lot of different rods that I've worked with over the years, and I finally got to make one myself, which is pretty cool. Like my favorite crankbait, and I just switched to the Swait guys. They're Swait rods. They're out west. And I've been with them 3 years now. They've got a really good cranking series called Mad Crankiness. I've got to make my own crankbait rod. So I've got my signature series. It's 7 foot. It's like composite glass. It's a combo. And dude, it's extremely well balanced. I can throw that crankbait a mile, but same thing. You got enough backbone, the way it's tapered, I've got enough backbone to get a hook in them when they eat it. But then I've got that soft tip where all you've got is treble hooks in that. I mean, if you're throwing a little crankbait like that with treble hooks, 1, you're going to bend them out, or 2, those smallmouth are crazy. And if you don't have enough give in your rod, they're going to pull loose. They're going to bend the hook. They're going to break. It just doesn't work. They're going to tear their mouths. But when they eat it, if you've got that soft tip and that, that just that give, that's the deal. I mean, once you hook them and get through that first jump and catch up to them, you got to have that soft tip. And it's that rod has been I was waiting to make one that was kind of my style for the crankbait, and I've had it for a year and a half now. It's perfect. It's for any of the medium diving crankbaits. I'll throw like some smaller crankbaits on it too. I throw a top water on it once in a while. I mean, it's juicy.
Okay. As far as line, what's your setup for line for that technique?
Pretty much all 12, 12-pound Sunline Sniper. Just it's a really smooth fluorocarbon, casted them out. It's got a little bit of stretch too, which again I like. Like, some guys used to crank with mono, which probably has too much stretch. I don't think you get a good hook in them. And that Sunline Sniper, it's a little softer. You can throw it a mile. And again, like I feel like when they get it, there's a little bit of give, which you want. Like if you threw that on braid, something like that. I mean, most guys wouldn't crank with braid, but I'm just trying to give you a good comparison. If you're at home, like when you have braid, there is zero give and zero stretch. If your crankbait's moving along and it's braid and that fish goes to get the bait, a lot of times you actually feel them before they swallow the bait. So like you fit that first and there's no stretch, and then you're just pulling the bait away. I did that, growing up 10, 12 years ago when I first started to kind of, feel out the braid, what braid's good for, what situations is it not. I mean, missed a lot of fish, and a lot of it was because I was, taking it from them when I shouldn't have been.
Sure. Now, I've thrown that crankbait before, and I feel like the stocked hooks are really good on it. Do you keep that, or do you switch it out? Are you a straight shank, extra wide gap? What do you prefer as far as the hooks on the crankbait?
The stock hooks are good on that. It's a great hook. I was fun fishing. I wouldn't touch them. I always keep a little file. It's like a $5 Lowe's or Menards little diamond file in the boat. I touch up my hooks regularly. I mean, half the fish I catch, and you might catch them with one hook here, and then here. You've got to have a sticky hook. If that fish comes to make a move, all I want is that other hook to catch them anywhere that it touches. And if your hooks are sticky, that's going to happen. And for me, I do change them out still, and I regularly sharpen them. I'll throw a little short shank hook. I always throw a number 4 on the front and a number 6 on the back.
Okay.
If you do anything else, you try to go 4s and 4s. I feel like they just catch too much. The 4 gives you just enough. It's a pretty big hook. And then that 6 in the back gives you a little bit of leeway. That way they're maybe 1 out of 50 to 60 casts. That front hook will hook that back hook. So, yeah.
Gotcha. And that was straight shank, correct?
Yeah, that was just a wide gap.
Wide gap.
Not the wide gap, just the straight,
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The only time I'll throw a wide gap is occasionally on a jerk bait on the front 2 hooks. And then I still put that round bend on the back hook just because I feel like that round bend gets them when they slap at it a little bit more. I like that round bend on the back hook.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
We got to talk colors a little bit. What have you experimented with, and what would be your go-to? And do you see a difference, depending on conditions, whether it be wind or sunlight, cloudiness, bait fish? What are you determining your color choice when it comes to cranking? Yeah,
man, this is with everything. Like there's so many fish out there that either want to bite or don't want to bite. So I keep it super simple, and it's with my plastics too. Like it's like green pumpkin, black and blue, and maybe like a watermelon. Like I don't need 50 colors of everything. Like that's not me. I'm going to find a fish that wants to eat the color that I'm throwing. Now, saying that, you still got to pay attention. If you're losing a lot of fish, they're following it. It means you got something close, but it's not quite right. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, the only color I really even throw when I'm cranking with that is the DC 300 and real shad. It's a minnow. It's a shad, and they eat the fire out of it. Now I say that, and when you go to places like Lake St. Clair and Champlain, they're eating bluegill a lot too. They've got an awesome sunfish color that looks just like a perch. I'm sorry, I misspoke. The color sunfish, but those fish eat perch a lot, and it's got like a little orange bill here, green on the sides. It looks a lot like a perch, even though they call it sunfish. And occasionally I'll mix that in, but I like the way that real shad looks, coming through the water. It's fairly bright, and I'm smallmouth big believer that they're visual eaters, and it's not like they need it to look exactly like. They just need to see it, and they want to see something, whether it's white. I mean, I've caught them on a pink fluke. I've caught them on a big giant white spinnerbait. Like they want to see that contrast, I think. And for me, it's that real shad, and I don't usually take it off. And I say that. And the one time in Texas when I did catch like 32 pounds on it, it was in practice. I wasn't really planning on cranking off the bank, and I had another color on. It's called Ghost Smog. It's kind of like a transparent shad, and it's obviously not a good watercolor if it's got a little stain to it. And when I found that group of fish, like I think I hung like 5 or 6 before I actually caught one. I wasn't sure if they were white bass or bass, but they couldn't see it. And a couple of them I pulled, I'm like, damn, that felt like a big one. And I just never got a hook in them. And I finally caught one. It was like a 4-pounder. I'm like, it was one of those deals where I just had it on from the tournament before. I'm like, maybe I can catch them cranking here. Pull it out of the rod box and lose a few fish on. I'm like, well, I'll mix this into the rotation, but I'll obviously put the right color on. And that was the deal there. I went from missing those 5 or 6 like that, and then in the tournament, I mean, you guys, if anybody watched it, I mean, when I was on live, I think I caught like 10 or 12 straight, and they all had it like in the, in the gills because they were getting it.
Yeah. Wow. Good stuff. So what time of year are you going to be throwing that crankbait, or is it pretty much pre-spawn through the fall?
The fall is phenomenal. It's obviously when they're on shad and they get up shallow. The only time I'd say I don't throw it nearly as much is in the spring. Okay. I feel like a lot of those fish suspend, smallmouth in particular, they suspend a little bit more. And, that jerk bait's a super good choice, top water stuff a little bit, and like, the fly and that kind of stuff. But the big thing with that is the gravel and the rock out in like those kind of lakes, like Lake Erie, Sturgeon Bay, like those kind of places. And then when you get to the grass lakes, it's finding the right grass that holds the bait and the fish. And that's Oneida is big with that for sure. And so is Champlain. Those fish, they got those places where they're not on the bottom, they're suspended. I mean, this time at Champlain this past season, I think I finished like 20 something, but man, I was catching, it's still a great finish, but there was a couple groups of fish in the grass that I thought I was going to crush them. And like what you were just talking about, they left. And the first day, I mean, I did catch like 7 or 8 on one little stretch of grass, but in practice it was like blowing, a quarter mile, and I would get bit every 5 to 10 casts. I mean, it was stupid. They were all big. And that was just grass in like 15 foot of water. And it came up maybe, 4 or 5 feet. So my crankbait's just kind of nipping the top, and it's just around where they are,
Yeah. Are you getting that buried sometimes in the grass and ripping it out, or are you worried about that, or is that what you want to have happen?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, it's the same stop and go. I mean, whether I'm getting hung in grass or not, I'm still ripping the crankbait. Once I get it down where I feel like I'm around the grass, I'm stop and go, I'm pumping whatever I can do to make it look different. And that's usually what that gets them. I mean, I've been around people that are cranking too, and I don't want to say you catch 2 to 1, but you're going to get more bites when you're making your crankbait look a little unique.
Would you be throwing that crankbait when it's dead calm, or can you get them to go?
Yeah, and every place is situational. Okay. St. Clair is some of the best crankbait bites I've had out there. They just eat when it's calm, I think, because they can see well. And then places like same thing, Oneida. I've had some really good, calm, rippled days with the crankbait. And then Champlain has been a little different because I feel like there's current in there. And a lot of that crankbait bite with whether the fish are low or high has to do with what the grass is doing. Like if it blew really hard the day before and then the next day it's calm, well, sometimes that grass backflows and it kind of stands up a little bit and it causes those fish to suspend. That crankbait bite can be really good around that grass. So it's paying attention to what not just is going on the surface, but beneath the water too.
And I'm sure the Great Lakes, notorious for big waves. I assume you throw it in big waves, big weather too, and catch it.
Yeah, when it's right, man, and they're there, it's game on. That tournament that I won when we fished out of St. Clair on day 2, it blew. I wasn't sure if I was going to go. It blew like 20, and it was supposed to get to 40 in the afternoon out of the southwest, and I was fishing on the North Shore. And I got down there. I think it took like an hour and 50 to get down there. And I caught like 23 pounds in an hour and 45 minutes. And I was fishing in like big 4s and 5-footers. And you couldn't throw into the wind. You'd have to just kind of, try to hold your boat and then launch across the wind. And it worked well for me because my co-angler wasn't fishing anymore because he was throwing up and just sitting back. And it was crazy. We caught him. And when I was time to leave, we just rolled out, and it took me 3 hours and 10 minutes to get back, getting gas, and I was going, 8 to 12 mile an hour. But dude, those fish were still eating because it hadn't ruined it yet. It was fun. As you can tell, it's still on my mind. I need to get back out there and win a dang derby again.
Man, That got me excited for throwing a crankbait. I would say as a smallmouth angler, that's one of my weaknesses. It's just something I don't do a whole lot of. But man, I'm fired up to go get me some of
Oh,
these
it's fun.
crankbaits, dude.
Yeah, who wants to just go like this and just, you know, like blow and wait for one to, when you can just fire it and rip it and
Exactly. So, you know, you've been all over the country chasing smallmouth. What would you say your favorite? You know, obviously you have a love for Lake Erie. If you could pick another body of water to fish for smallmouth, whether it be a real popular one or you know, something a lot of people may not know about, where would that place be, or what's special about it?
There's two places. The first, Lake Champlain. I've always said that since the first time I went up there. And I say it because it's one of the only places I feel like you can always power fish. Like I'll get some big ones drop shotting because I've spent 15, 20 years up there, and there's a lot of little neat gravel and neat rock deals. But those giant ones up north, they live around the grass. They chase the big perch, so they suspend a lot. And I've caught some huge bags on a big topwater, caught them on a crankbait, caught them on a jerk bait, caught them on a chatterbait, a spinnerbait. And it's not like you have to just drop shot. Like sometimes at St. Clair, they only bite the dang drop shot. And at Champlain, I don't think there's been a time where I've weighed them all on a drop shot. Like I catch them on all sorts of stuff. And I say the same thing about Oneida. I feel like that's been a place where I should have won a handful of times and just haven't done it yet. And we were just there, and I really thought that was the one, dude. I mean, I know it's tougher this year, and I had a bed. My daughter gave me hand, foot, and mouth, which is most adults don't get. I was the lucky one and had 103 fever and couldn't eat food for 5 days, lost 12 pounds, and practiced one day, like while sleeping on the water a little bit because I was hurting.
Sure.
Still getting 8 or 10 bites, and they were all like 3.5 to 4.25 pounders, and the wind changed, and I just couldn't adjust. And it's crazy because I've had, you know, finished like 5th up there, 8th, 13th, and I was like, dude, it's coming together this time. I'm putting in the work while sick.
Right.
And like we talked about, they're gone. They weren't even gone. They were there. They just went bite. I could see them down there. I'd see them foul your bait, do this, that. I was like, not today, sir. You shall not pass. So.
Yeah, right. God, man. Well, that's the frustrating part with smallmouth. What do you think separates you from some of the other anglers when it comes to, you know, being so successful when it comes to smallmouth fisheries? Why is that?
I'd say honestly, it's from doing what I started doing initially. It's that sweet spots on Lakes Erie. That's why I'm not a big fan of I love to fish St. Clair for fun with, you know, sponsor people or whatever, because you just drag around, throw any which way of the boat, and somebody can catch one. That's not how I want to fish a tournament. I want to know exactly where and exactly when I'm going to get bit. And growing up fishing Lake Erie, like I know the exact sweet spot. And now with the technology, you know, with the Humminbird 360, it's just lightning speed as far as being able to identify that spot. I mean, so many times before, like when I first started, I had one graph on the back. I'd have to turn it around to see the front, and I'm trying to line up and hit things. Like, dude, I could be 50 feet off on a pile that's as big as the front deck of your boat, and they could be ready to bite, but you're just not hitting it. Now it's like, I know within literally 2 to 3 casts whether I should or shouldn't get bit. I might fish for 5 or 6 minutes, but when my bait feels the right stuff, that little rubble, those little sweet spots, it doesn't take long. Like I don't need to spend so much time in those areas. So I'd say being able to identify that sweet spot, I'm able to fish more water and cover more water, and you know, eventually run into them. I mean, that's the deal for me.
All the years you spend on Lake Erie and these little sweet spots that you have, do you find that there's some areas that used to produce really well for you that no longer produce? Do you find that it's a year-to-year thing? Some years they're on it, some years they're not. What are your thoughts on that? Because I struggle a little bit about that on some of the bodies of water that I fish, where I feel like I've crushed them. I've had some awesome days, and then the following year I can't get a bite on it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because it is 100% that. I mean, there's places that I still catch them at almost all the time. Like I got 30 places that are my juice, but they're not always triggering each year. Like a couple times it was the deep places for 2 or 3 years, and they were just lights out. There's one place in particular that my buddy Ryan said, and I used to call the Muskie, because the first time we found it, we'd never seen it. We went out, it was just a little ridge. There's no contour out there. It's just a little ridge we found and started catching, and we crushed them and then caught a giant muskie. And for like 2 years, that place was on fire. And there was this other guy that used to run a bass cat also had this white mullet. And dude, he saw us out there one year, and for like 2 years, he cashed checks in like every BFL because he snaked that spot from us when we were doubled up.
Right.
And after that, I think in 7-10 years, I've caught 2 bass on that place. And you go out and you could catch them 18 to 20 pounds every single tournament, every time. And the next 10 years, never caught a fish on it. They were there. I was telling, just like I'm telling you this, I was telling my guy that when the elites were there, when I finished 4th, like 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And it was one of those things, like they were in that area the fish were. I didn't get bit there. I got bit everywhere around it. And I'm like, well, I got to check this one spot. It'll take 2 minutes. I haven't caught a bass here in 5 years. If I do, it's going to be a big one. Roll up and catch a 5 1/4. And it's like,
really?
And that's one of the 2 I've caught in the last like 10 years there. And that's it.
That's crazy.
Good timing. Yes.
Yeah. But you got to like all winter long. I don't know. It'd haunt me. I'd be like, I wonder if they're going to be there next year.
Dude, I think I almost wonder if there's something like with zebra mussels or like a little crat or something that's down there and they get in that area until they eat everything and then they leave. Because when they're there, dude, I've had places where when it's right, I mean, you just get the boat up here, drag over, and you or your co-angler, or you double up every single time. Like that crankbait place when I was catching them, I would catch one. And I just told my co-angler, as soon as I hook one, pitch out. I'm like, you're going to have one on too. And we doubled up literally almost every time. The one day on Saturday of the finals, we got to fish for 4 hours because the wind changed. And I think I caught like 4 or 5 bags over 25 pounds. I mean, not 25 pounds, over 20 pounds, but I think I ended up with 24 or something like that. But it was just unbelievable. And it's like, I don't know if they're all down there or if they're just like in line swimming to get your bait. I mean, it was insane.
As good of a smallmouth angler that you are, what would you say your biggest weakness when it comes to smallmouth fishing is, if you think you have any?
I do, but I think I'm working on it this year. Honestly, it's that stupid black fly. Everybody catches them on that, and I've never caught a bass on it until this year. I had never really even thrown it because I like to spy bait a lot, and I've caught them well doing that. But I got some of those black flies from Wisconsin a few years ago, and this year at Thousand Islands when we were there, the hardest time I have up there is when they're like transitioning. They're still a little bit up shallow. They want to be out deep, but they're in that like funk. And I started to realize that like I had caught a couple on it in practice. And then I think it was day 1, I ended up catching like 2 giants, like 5.5 pounders off the bed, and had a couple deep bites. But like I had like 20 pounds almost, but I mean, I weighed at 2 1/4 and 2.5 pounder. And it was the next day on day 2 where I had a couple shallow, like sandy areas, and I had fish that I had followed before. I'm like, I'll try that stupid fly. And I didn't know how to set the hook. I ripped it from the first one, and I watched him get it like a 4 pounder. And the second one I caught was like a 3 3/4. And then on day 3, I go out and I've got 3 fish, like they're all 3 1/4. I got a couple hours left, hour and a half, and I roll up to an area just that has some little humps and stuff. And I freaking smashed them. I caught a 5.8 on it, a 4, a 3.5. I caught my whole bag.
On the hair jig?
Yeah, a hair jig. Wow. And I had never, that's the one thing that I've always been missing in my setup when it gets like that pre-spawn, post-spawn when they're just starting to mix around. I've never been able to catch those shallow fish. And this year for the first time, that third day, that hour and a half, I'm like, dude, this is like, if you can mix this in with your deep stuff, this is what you need to do.
Sure.
To win some of these dang tournaments.
Now, I love the fact that you admit that, a lot of people, it's been around for a while, but you also said that you love to spy bait. So I need your opinion on this, because as much as I love the hair jig, I don't throw it as much as some other people do either. And I feel, do you think you could catch those same fish on a spy bait over a hair jig? And maybe maybe not.
I don't know enough about the hair jig to know what it's really imitating, but I do think it's very similar. When you start to watch the hair jig in the back, like when you reel it, the back of the hair is fluttering. So it's almost, I wonder what it looked like before, but it does look like a little, just a little black minnow or something like that. And the spy bait it's almost like kind of like a tantalizing. My thing with the spy bait is what I always said is, like you throw a big giant swim bait next to docks, you're going to see every fish that lives there. But they're not going to bite. You know, occasionally you get one to bite, but the draw power that a big swim bait has is huge. And I feel like a spy bait actually has a lot of draw power for a small finesse bait. It's kind of tantalizing. And when they get in that weird mood, when they want to follow a crankbait or nip a jerk bait, like that's the bait, like those high pressure days. And I really think that the fly would do a pretty similar job of that. Maybe maybe it has some to do with, you know, maybe one's better with water clarity versus another. That may be an issue too. I haven't had enough time to play around with that, but I do think they both draw similar. And there's a time when, like, those are that's the deal. You know, you need to put the jerk bait down, put the crankbait down, and pick that up on, because you're going to get behind. You're gonna lose fish when they're nipping at a jerk bait, and that other stuff, they just, you know, it's done.
Give us a crash course on the spy bait. Some of your favorite conditions, areas, time of year, if you could.
Yeah, Oneida, phenomenal place to catch them in the spy bait. And I have stroked them out there, especially when they used to get on the birds real good. And for me, it's like I feel like it's like a pendulum. You want that bait in the strike zone, like it's going down as you're reeling it in, and then midway through the cast, it's starting to come up as you bring it back in. And so I feel like the sweet spot for the cast is, like, consider your cast, you know, 100%. I feel like 25 to 75% is the sweet spot for that cast. That's when your bait is in the strike zone. You don't want that bait on the bottom or down near the bottom. Like, that bait is like a swim bait. It's designed to be up and above them to get them to come up to see it. So if it's, you know, 10 or 12 feet out, I'm throwing out there, I might give it, you know, 3-4 seconds. It falls about a foot a second or so. That way that bait's at 4 feet, and I'm going to let my bait go from 4 down to, you know, 7 or 8 feet, and it's going to come back up. And when it's going to finish at, you know, 30 feet from the boat, 5, I wind it in. Okay. And with smallmouth, before I wind it in, like we talked about, I give it a couple quick pumps, I stop it, and then I reel it in. Because if there's a fish following it on that initial stop, if they're going to eat it, that's when they eat it.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, good stuff. Now we're running out of time. A couple more questions, Chad, if we could. I ask this with every guest. I want to know what your biggest personal best smallmouth is.
Dang it! It's one of these BFL trophies or some big bass ones. Man, I just can't break 7. I can't break 7. I've caught a 613 in the tournament. I've caught like 6.8, 6.9s, but I've never caught a 7. I might have caught one at St. Lawrence in practice once. I weighed it and it was like right at it, but my scale was always weighing light.
Yeah,
did have one co-angler catch a damn 7-1 out of the back of my boat. And it was on Erie, and it was rough, and I knew right where they were sitting. I was casting. They wouldn't bite, and I'm like, I got to do it. So I drove up, did the old Erie drag through there. And again, I don't have control. He's right under the boat. His darter was before my darter. And he thought he had a drum, and I look back, and there's a 7-pound smallmouth, like, just laying on the surface, and he's frozen. Sure. I had to reach down and grab it and threw it in the boat. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? And he jumped up. He's like, I froze.
So just under 7. Let me ask you this one, because I'm sure you have a bunch. Do you have any moments when you catch a specific fish that stands out in your mind, whether it be for a tournament or something that was like a, you know, it gave you an idea or a clue that really helped you? Is there a particular fish or a situation that you can talk about?
Dude, the funny thing about fishing with, I don't know, with my memory or with other people's, like, you can go back every year and I can almost tell you every fish I weigh in. Like, you know the bite, you know the 5 you caught, and there's so many fish that stand out in my head. I mean, like the one I caught at Texas on the DC 300, that was the biggest bass I ever caught at the time. Sure. It was at 810, and it was insane, that bite. I had another one that I caught on a big crankbait, like a 8XD on Chickamauga in an open. It was a 9.8, and I had one that was like 2 pounds bigger on the same bait at the same time. I almost landed them both. I thought one was 6 to 7, one was 8 to 9. They were noticeably different. And then I watched the big one get away, and I caught the little one that was 6, and it was a 9.8.
Jeez.
Like, you get things like that. And then, oh God, dude, at the Classic this year, I think it was my first cast to my first tree of the Bassmaster Classic on day 2, and I catch an 8-1 on a Demiki topwater. The weight, when that fish jumped, I thought it was a damn 10-pounder. I mean, it was so long. It didn't have much belly on it, but it just, if it was built like a fat fish in the sprint, and it was a 10, 11-pounder. And I knew right when it come up, my heart was like through my chest. And like, you fish for turn. That is what we live for. I mean, that feeling on the initial, when you get that bite, and then please let me land this fish. And then 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 you get the hold up feeling, and then you get that same feeling when you bring it into the stage or weigh in. Like that's the 3 moments of.
So when you're in a big tournament, you got a big smallmouth on, are you freaking out? Now I see a lot of guys running all over the boat with their rod and stuff like that. How are you when it comes to fighting a big smallmouth?
I'm calm myself. I mean, I'm excited. Like I want to be loud. Like I'm like, oh, come, I get jacked up, but I'm making sure I do the right things with the rod. And a lot of times it is like, you've got to be ready to move. Those fish are so fast. I mean, I've had them where you're running to the boat, and then all of a sudden they go back around, and if you don't run, they're going to go to the engine, or they're going to get in the trolling motor. And like the guys that just sit in the chair, I mean, it's hard. I mean, maybe they'll land them, but I think the big thing is every bass I hook and I'm fighting, I want to land every one. And the more you hook, you're going to lose them now and again, but don't lose them because it's something that you did or something that you could have controlled.
Sure.
It's like the same thing when they're hitting a crankbait and you got to catch up to them. Like at Pickwick that first day, the current was so heavy. I didn't in practice say on a chatterbait and they just swim with it, and you could let them go walk around like walking a dog. But when that current ripped up, dude, they would hit it and swim straight down current. And I missed a bunch of them because I couldn't catch them. Like they'd pull off, or I wouldn't get a hook in them until I made a change. I got a longer rod out, and when they would bite, I would crank as fast as I could, and I would run to the back of the boat and then sweep at the back. And that was the difference. On day 2 and day 3, I never lost one that I hooked. On day 1, I think I lost like 8. And it's like,
wow.
Sometimes you got to make those changes.
Yeah.
When the current picks up, slows down, or be ready to run.
Yeah, I get it. So if I could
all the time, but some of the stuff he does, the guy does for a reason.
Now, if I'm let's say next year, you have one bait to throw for smallmouth, one bait only.
Ooh.
What's it going to be?
All year long.
All year, you can only use one bait.
God, I hate saying it because it's boring, but it's probably going to be a dang drop shot, just because whether it's calm.
Well, that's a technique. I need to know the bait you're going to throw on that drop shot.
Oh, anybody that knows anything about me, like I'm sponsored by Lunker Hunt. I love me some Lunker Hunt limit worms. I catch lots of fish on them, but I still love the profile of that old school Erie darter. Like it's a poor boys now. It's a Lure Craft Big D. It's just a little bit bulkier. The ridges. It's like one of those do nothing baits. And I have won a lot of money on it. I got a lot of confidence in it, so I'm not playing around switching this bait and that bait, and he gets the job done.
Let's take it one step further. Color. What color is it going to be?
The only color is green pumpkin.
Green pumpkin.
Keep it simple, man.
I'm right there.
You're not gonna eat.
I'm right there. Good stuff. I don't know, man. I'm excited. This was good. I know our viewers and listeners are definitely going to grab a few of these crankbaits. I'm going to try to actually link that in the description here as well for you guys. Chad, how can people follow you and check you out on social media? What's the best way?
Yeah, we're on Instagram and Facebook. Those are the two main deals. We're on Twitter a little bit too, but at Chad Pipkens for both of them. And do a lot of cool giveaways, fun stuff. Try to give back when we can, and give some shirts and baits away, give some rods away. We give it all away. Some good tips, sometimes not.
Dude, this was some real good tips here. I'll tell you that. So I encourage everybody to follow Chad. I'm going to have that information as well in the description. Again, Chad, thank you. I know you've been very, very busy. Wish you the best of luck in the future, man. And I think you'll get that W sooner than later.
I'm due year 10, the lucky year 10. That's what I hope.
There you go. There you go. Awesome. Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time, we'll see you guys on the water.
Thanks so much for listening today. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show and follow us on Instagram at SmallmouthCrush. Also, the YouTube channel, Smallmouth Crush. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and comment with a review below. And as always, until next time, we'll see you on the water.